Okay, so it feels like at least once a month on the regular Almanac episodes where guests and I rewrite Oscars history, the merits of animated films, voice acting, and the directors that make those movies are discussed and compared to live action filmmaking. I have been desperate to explore this more as an area I'm not so versed in myself, and I have someone here that's an expert in the field who can give us a window into this world. He is a 30-year veteran of the animation industry, having been an animator, a storyboard artist, a writer, a director for animated features and television such as Meet the Robinsons, Winnie the Pooh, Tarzan, Monsters at Work, many, many other things. Let me introduce you to Steven Anderson. Thank you so much for being here with us, Steve.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you, Andrew and Britt, for having me.
We are so excited. I know Britt's very excited.
I am.
I'm going to introduce Britt really quickly, but you can, of
Hello.
course, see her if you're watching on video. It just wouldn't be an animated interview if I didn't bring in my co-interviewer now at this point. This is like a two-handed thing Britt and I do. Her passion for animation far exceeds mine, so it would be a disservice to be doing this myself. She is, of course, 1/3 of the 1001 by 1 podcast out there. So Britt Reinholz-Hobson, welcome back once again.
You just really wanted someone super opinionated about animation to come on this. That's how I feel. And I feel honored. And thank you so much for including me. I'm very excited about this conversation.
This is going to be a blast. Steve's got so much knowledge to impart on the two of us. And for people who are watching and listening, I'm sure they're going to get a full and better understanding of what goes into the world of animation. We got a couple of games that I'm going to surprise the two of them with here shortly. We're going to dig into all the behind the scenes stuff. But to begin with, I want to kind of start with Steve's career history, some of the highlights that are out there. So, Steve, if you don't mind me just kind of starting things off for people who aren't familiar, where did your love of film and animation come from at an early age?
Well, I had a very strict diet of Disney movies and TV shows when I was growing up. My parents were very particular about what I watched, and of course, Disney was a very safe bet. That I would not be, no one would be offended or shocked or harmed by watching Disney movies. That was really that was sort of everything to me. I watched those films, both animated and live action, um, and fell in love with them. Fell in love with just Disney in general. But then something about animation, something about watching those animated movies made me want to go home and draw. There was just a connection to it. I wanted to try to. I loved the character, particularly the characters in Disney animated films. How expressive they are, the appeal of the designs, the eyes, just the everything about them is so appealing to me. And I kind of wanted to capture that somehow. I couldn't pop in a video afterwards, and I couldn't relive the movies. The only way I guess I could relive it was to try to draw them. So. That also then sparked my love of drawing, love of animation, and then eventually love of just filmmaking in general. But Disney movies were everything to me.
So this was very close to you from a very early age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I was definitely
that was my comfort zone.
I was a Disney girl as well. When I was a kid, watched every single movie, grew up on the TV shows. They still mean so much to me. Going back and watching even the really old ones that we used to watch, like I just rewatched The Great Mouse Detective, and I was like, God, this is a good flick. And the animation is clean, and I love it.
Yep.
I think one of my first memories still is seeing Fantasia on VHS as a very young child. That's just I think for a lot of us, Disney is the first entry point for filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could be totally wrong because I wouldn't obviously remember a lot of the nuances from when I was really tiny, but I believe the first movie I saw was a re-release of Snow White at a drive-in movie theater because I remember having a very distinct. I thought that the voices were coming from people behind the screen that were had microphones and were kind of doing the voices through the picture. Because I obviously didn't know what I was looking at, but I have a very distinct memory of thinking that. So I believe that was kind of my first real moment where I kind of understood a movie and that I connected and engaged with something. And so, yeah.
That's incredible.
That's so cool. I think my first was 101 Dalmatians. My dad brought me to see it. Classic.
Yep. That's also one of my favorites.
Oh God, it's so good. So how early in your life did you realize that you wanted to go into film animation as a career?
I think It was around 1981, and there was a book that came out called Disney Animation: The Illusion of Life, and it was written by two of Walt Disney's 9 old men, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. And it was like this thick, and it was the moment when my brain just totally exploded. I had a few other Disney coffee table books prior to that. It had artwork, and sometimes there was art and stuff, but it was mainly screen grabs and things from movies and photographs and stuff like that. This book was the first thing that really peeled back the curtain on how Disney movies are made, and it was so thorough. It was just packed with storyboards and concept drawings and animation drawings, and in particular animation drawings that were laid out in sequence, so I could scan across the page and watch the movement, watch the poses change from A to B to C to D to E. And I'd never seen that before. And then in the text, they went in and talked about all the different people, not just actual names of the artists, but then what are the roles of these people that make these movies. There's a storyboard artist, and there's visual development artists, and there's these people called animators who bring the characters to life. And as far as I recall, that was the first time I really understood that there were what the people made these things, and that there were different disciplines within that the making of these movies that I could actually pursue. Oh, the people that bring them to life are called animators. That's what I want to do. I want to be an animator. I want to be the person that draws the characters acting and expressing and coming to life. Things changed a bit for me later. I went into animation initially, but then moved into storyboarding and directing. But that was really the thing that made me say, okay, I want to work at Disney and I want to do that. And so that was probably when I was about 11 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. That's
It
amazing.
sounds like an amazing book. Yeah, I was just thinking, I really want to read that.
For my generation, it's sort of referred to as the Bible. Like, that's the thing. There's a whole several generations that orbit my age group. That was the thing that really kicked off their obsession with animation.
I love that.
Yeah. You got to be feeling like you're pinching yourself still all the time. Like to find something you're so passionate about at 11 and still be on that path is incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
I feel really fortunate that I was able to pursue it and actually get in and am doing it to this day. It's pretty special.
That is. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that so much.
Now, I promise I'm not going to derail this whole conversation into a Meet the Robinsons talk, because my kids, so before we ever got connected, I watched that movie with my oldest, who's now almost 8. We watched it when he was like, I don't know, 4 or 5, and he really fell in love with it. And then when we connected, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to talk to this person. And so the kids the last few weeks have been driving me nuts with questions about Meet the Robinsons. Wow. It's been really delightful to like bring them into the but what we did was we sort of crowdsourced some questions for this interview, which I thought would be a really good like two-hander with the idea that animation is such a collaborative process. So I didn't just want it to be me and Britt here asking you questions. So I pulled some questions from people online. The first one I have is from a good friend of the show, Darren Lundberg, over at Nostalgia Cast and Back to Bluey, which I'm rocking the Bluey right here. His question ties into Meet the Robinsons. He asked, how did your upbringing form the characters and the story in that being your first feature film? I feel like you have some personal connection to the story of that. Would you mind sharing for people who aren't familiar, like what gravitated you towards wanting to make that film?
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of backstory as to how I got onto it. I'd expressed interest to the studio about being a director someday, and so they were keeping me in mind. But one of the things back at that time, they wanted to make sure any director candidate had to at least have done a leadership role in the studio in some capacity. So I did Emperor's New Groove. I was story supervisor on that. They asked me to do one more before they would consider me as a director, and that was for Brother Bear. And as I was wrapping up with Brother Bear, I started talking to them about, future directing opportunities. They said, well, we have this script and we'd like you to read it and see if it's something you would be interested in doing. It was developed by a writer that they'd hired from the outside and 2 development executives. And it was an adaptation of this book called A Day with Wilbur Robinson, written and illustrated by William Joyce, which I knew of. And I knew the studio had the rights to it and had been developing it kind of off and on over the years. So I took the script, I read it. the story that they had created was about a boy who was in an orphanage wanting to get adopted. And his whole thing was about trying to kind of answer those questions about where he came from, who his birth parents were. And what the studio didn't know at the time is that I was also adopted. I had very different circumstances. I was adopted as an infant rather than Lewis, who's adopted as a 12, 13-year-old boy. I wasn't in an orphanage. There were specifics that were different, but this notion of wondering where you came from, why were you given up, who were your birth parents, who created you. Those things were questions I had asked ever since I can remember. My parents were very open about the fact that I was adopted. They told me at a very early age. So those thoughts were always going around in my head. And so I came back to the studio and I explained, my connection. And I said, there's no question in my mind that I have to do this project. And this is something I would want to bring out more in the story, is more about, let's really get into the mindset of this boy and kind of get those feelings out on screen. That it was kind of in that original script, but not as much as I wanted. So that was part of my contribution to the story, was to bring that out. So somehow it was meant to be. The studio had no idea when they were handing me that script that I had that connection. But again, I think somehow it was just in the cards. Like the right material found me, and I was hooked from the very beginning.
To quote Jeff Goldblum, life found a way.
It did. Yeah.
What I could not believe, though, is, so I was watching it again with the kiddos a couple of nights ago, and we had watched it several years back, and we hadn't watched it in a while. And so I thought, I wonder if my oldest is going to even recognize this movie, because he's seen so much in the years since. And we turned it on, and I'm like, hey, you might remember this, or you might not at this point. And I could not believe his memory capacity, because he started reciting the story start to finish. Wow. And I was like, wow, that story really like connected with him at some level in his brain from an early age.
Cool. That's really cool.
It's a really poignant story, and I think that it you're able to take these themes that do seem kind of large, especially for like a child but children do go through that, right? And it makes it so that it's palatable for children, and they can understand that these questions are good things to ask. It's part of being alive. It's part of being a human. I really appreciated that when I rewatched it this morning. And it's such a cute, fun, like really thoughtful film. And I really, really appreciate it. Also, I think everybody's hair looks really good in it, which I think in animation can be very difficult.
On the hair.
Yeah, it shows. It really does, especially for like 2007, when that technology was still becoming what it is now, right? So just had to shout out the hair, because I thought it was pretty good.
Good.
Well, that's the perfect segue to the next question. Britt's always good about doing that. So we got another great question from Sanjay Creates over on Instagram, and Sanjay said, I've always wondered how the overall stylization of the characters was determined for Meet the Robinsons, since this was Disney Animation's first CGI film with humans, and it perfectly avoided the uncanny valley while still being believable, extremely emotionally moving, especially in the facial performances. And he wondered, were the character designs mostly inspired by the William Joyce illustrations?
Yes and no. When we first began, when the movie got greenlit into production and we began our initial design phase, the leadership at the time really wanted the movie to look exactly like William Joyce's illustrations from the book, and love Bill's work. Obviously, fantastic, great, just a great warmth to his designs, and such a great imaginative take. But I felt very strongly that since we have a movie with a lot of dynamics to it, we have a lot of really broad comedy, and we have a lot of really deep sort of emotional stuff. We needed designs that had a full, that you could really play a full range of emotions. Nothing against Bill's designs, but I just thought I think we should push a little bit further. So we brought on an artist named Joe Mosier, who's a fantastic designer, great character designer. He and I had worked together a bit on Emperor's New Groove. He was the designer on that film. So Joe then started playing with really pushing the shapes and the proportions of the characters and kind of really stylizing them. So we had those two extremes. We had Joe on the one end, very, very kind of pushed Disney stuff, and then Bill on the other end, that beautiful illustrative quality. And then pinged back and forth between those two throughout the process, trying to find a balance between the two, trying to maintain some caricature to it, but also the warmth of what Bill did in his books. Also, a huge part of it then was back to the technology that you were talking about, Britain, as far as the hair and everything. This was the first time that Disney Animation Studios had ever done humans in CG. Up to that point, it had been Dinosaur, it had been Chicken Little, all beautifully done, but not humans. So on top of those designs, we then had to figure out what's the right balance of skin texture, hair texture, fabric texture that gives them a believability, but not that, as Sanjay said, not that kind of uncanny valley thing, or not pushing it so far. With all nothing, this is nothing against this movie that I'm about to mention, but from a personal standpoint, I felt it would go in a little too far. Like in Shrek, there's like, you see the pores in his skin on those close-ups, and to me, I was like, that I feel like is going a little too far. I think, yes, you want to feel the skin texture. If there's lighting coming from behind a character, you want to sort of see that glow in the ears and the,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But if we go into a close-up, I don't want to see, I don't want to see every little pore and stuff like that. So that was a lot of the conversations too, was about realism versus believability. But always making sure that we keep personality and character at the forefront, and give our characters that ability to express and to act and perform.
I think you did a brilliant job with it. Because there's nothing against Shrek. I think it's a great film. It's just not my personal favorite. And I think one of the things in it is like, as soon as you mentioned the pores, I went, oh yeah, that does make me uncomfortable when I'm watching that movie. Like, it's a little too far for me, but incredible work no matter what.
Absolutely.
And I
it's a
love that it works for
stylistic
CG.
choice, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just taste and choices and all that, and
Exactly.
it's just not. Yeah, exactly.
I have to imagine that period of time was pretty fascinating in terms of the world of animation, because you're sort of like crossing that bridge between where we're at now with so much CG as opposed to, the previous generation. Did you find that pocket of time creatively inspiring, or was it kind of like, was it more daunting to like think about this new evolution? Like, how did you all approach the change in technology?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging for me, being someone who grew up in the 2D animation world where it's all paper and pencil and that kind of stuff. I had a huge learning curve to figure out, oh, what is this now? Now we're dealing with virtual space and more dimension, and you can't cheat as much as in CG as you can in hand-drawn animation, and there's all that stuff. But I actually found it really inspiring eventually once I got into it and once I started understanding it. And it's may sound weird, but one example of that is obviously in hand-drawn animation, you have line, shape, color. You have all the graphics at your disposal to tell your story. You're implying dimension on a two-dimensional surface, and you're using those illustration kind of graphics to do that. In pardon me, in CG though, you do have that notion of virtual space. It's not literal dimension, but you are in a virtual dimensional space. You have lighting. You imply lighting in 2D. In CG, it's still it's all implying, but in CG, you're actually dealing with virtual cones of light that you can control. And then the weird little thing that blew me away was texture. Oh, you can use texture to tell your story. That's another component that you can use to compare and contrast throughout your story. And for example, in Meet the Robinsons, we used, in Lewis's present day, things are there. It's a lot of hardwood floors and brick texture and patterns on the wall, a lot of wallpaper patterns, and sort of a rougher, more earthy kind of texture. When you get to the future, it's the smooth stucco, it's glass, it's things more with more of a sheen, or again a sort of a softness and a smoothness to it. It's subtle, but as a director, as a storyteller, I love to be able to find any little what are any components that we can use to tell our story, that we can establish at the beginning and then contrast later as the story evolves. And certainly in a film like Meet the Robinsons, where it's time travel, so you do have different time period you're going to, everything you can throw at the audience to make sure they know where you are and when you are at any given moment is huge. So just some little things like that, I thought, oh, that's neat. That's another tool in the toolbox that you get with CG, you don't get with 2D. Not that it's bad, it's just different. So once I got my brain wrapped around it, and the team was so wonderful at kind of giving me my quick crash course in CG animation and being very patient with me as I learned it, I realized, okay, it's just another way to tell a story, and just different tools in the toolbox.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
absolutely. I think that that's the small attention to detail, the smoother surfaces versus the wood grains and everything. Really it's classic showing, not telling, right? It's
Yeah,
allowing
yeah,
the audience to understand what's happening without force feeding it to them. Because I feel I've seen so many movies as of late that will just say we are in a new place. Whereas what I really enjoyed in Meet the Robinsons was we we could tell where we were from that style
good, good,
choice. And it was very successful, I would say.
good. I appreciate that.
Um, so I have another question here from Darren, and it's how much of your work, specifically in something like Winnie the Pooh, is directly influenced by your love and respect of classic animation? Since we were just having this conversation about 2D versus CG.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because initially when I was asked if I was interested in doing Winnie the Pooh, my first thought, for some weird reason, was, "Oh, okay, I guess so." I don't really know if I like those characters. I mean, they're fine. I don't know if I really. And then the more I thought of it, I was like, "Oh, duh! You had jammies of Winnie the Pooh. You had record albums of Winnie the Pooh. You had storybooks. Your parents had all the A. Milne books in the book on the bookshelf." I was like, "No, you love those things." But it had been so long since I'd been in that world and thought about those characters, so that was really cool. And then um, the how do I put it? Um, it's not often at Disney Animation Studios that it's a little bit more often now, but we're usually doing original stories, creating things from scratch. Maybe it's adapted from a fairy tale or a book or something, but for the most part, you're starting from the blank page. But with Pooh, oh, the world exists, the characters exist. We know how they talk, we know what they look like, we know how they react with, like, we know their person. It was all there, and that gave us the chance to really, um, for all of us, go back to our childhood, and because we all were a student of those original Winnie the Pooh shorts that Disney did in the 60s and the early 70s, to kind of, oh yeah, walk those same paths that all of our heroes got to do or got to walk back then. One example were with the animators, the supervising animators, a few of them were able to kind of quite literally walk in the footsteps of their heroes and mentors. For example, there's an animator named Dale Bear, and Dale was the supervising animator on Owl for our film. Back in 1971, Dale was the second trainee brought into Disney Animation when the studio said, we need to open our doors and train a whole new generation of artists because the old folks are dying out and retiring, that kind of thing. Dale was the second trainee coming in, and his mentor was an animator named John Lounsbury, who was also one of Walt's 9 Old Men. John Lounsbury, in I think the first two Winnie the Pooh shorts, was the main animator of Owl. So now
Wow.
Dale got to shepherd Owl onto the screen for a new generation, which his mentor did back in the day. So little things like that, because most of our supervising animators were also from that generation, from the 70s and early 80s, that were trained by all those 9 Old Men and all the artists that came from Walt's generation, and now they're getting to pick up the torch and bring those characters back to life that their heroes got to do. So little things like that. If I may, I'll add one more kind
Of
of
course.
legacy
Sure.
generational thing
Yes, of
from
course.
the story standpoint of things. So in our story room, myself and my directing partner Don Hall, we are of a certain generation. The story team that we had, I think we had 5 story artists, 3 of which had just come out of the story training department at Disney, and their first movie was Winnie the Pooh. So they were like the youngest of the young, the newest of the new, I should say. On the other side of the spectrum, we had this man named Bernie Mattinson, who I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, Disney legend and animator, story artist, director of Mickey's Christmas Carol, one of several films that he directed. And we brought him on the film as kind of our we called him our Pooh guru, since he worked on the first couple shorts back in the day. So then, and Bernie started at Disney in 1953. So at that point, he had been at the studio for, I think, almost around 60 years or so. And at that point was the I hate to use the word oldest, but was the person with the most experience in the story department at that time. So as we're sitting in the room, we've got the newest of the new. We've got Bernie, the classic old school guy. Don Hall and I are somewhere in between, and our story room was like, this is the entire story of the story department right now at this moment. We're from A to Z.
That's
And
amazing.
so that was also just really neat, because to have that mix of the newest and the most seasoned in the room together, cross-pollinating and collaborating with each other. Anyways, so Pooh was like that, and it was really, really special.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and that actually goes right into my next question, which is perfect. How did it feel to be entrusted with Milne's classic characters, and how did it feel to oversee Bernie Mattinson's storyboards?
Yeah.
Literally the perfect transition right there.
Yeah.
You set it up for me perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, so I may have sort of blown the answer to that
Mm,
question already, but
no.
it was, like I said, it was really cool to get to play with those characters. Not just because, I mean, number one, they're just super fun to play with. They're like
Yeah.
the best toys that you can have to just spitball and draw and sketch and storyboard. Like, they just sort of write themselves. So they're super fun. But then also just what they really mean to the Disney legacy.
Yeah.
Also, how great the A.A. Milne books and the Ernest Shepard illustrations from his books, those were also hugely formative for me growing up. Even though I forgot in the moment, I remembered that they were. And Bernie didn't necessarily storyboard on the film. Bernie did some early what we call beat boards or outline boards when the story was forming super early. We didn't have a story team yet. It was just Don and myself and
Cool.
Bernie. And then once we started into storyboarding, Bernie was just kind of there as our North Star. But I mean, there were times where we'd be sitting in our room and we'd be brainstorming or doing whatever in our story room with our story team. And I would just kind of step out of the moment for like a little out of story room experience, and just realize Bernie Mattinson sitting next to me, and he's here in the story room with me, and it's on a film that I'm directing here at Disney. It was also another sort of pinch me moment. I mean, Bernie's movies, Mickey's Christmas Carol and Great Mouse Detective. Bernie was
Yeah.
also executive producer and one of the directors of Great Mouse Detective. Those were two really important films for me. They just loved those films growing up. I was the right age for them. I was already a big ass Disney nerd, and I
We all
just
are.
loved those films. So getting to just meet Bernie even before Winnie the Pooh was really special. But then to kind of be working with him and to be able to, like, hey, he knows my name and he says hi to me, and we're like we're
That's so
peers,
cool.
we're colleagues. Yeah, it's hard to put in words, but really, really cool.
One of the real joys of getting to do this little prep experience for interviewing you is I had somehow missed this new Winnie the Pooh that you directed just somewhere in time. I just didn't get around to it. And so I went
Yeah.
back and was watching it. And I kind of had that same experience where I was like, I don't know if I'm like a Winnie the Pooh guy. And then I started watching it, and the memories of like reading the books at my grandma's house, and it became like this warm blanket experience for like the
Yeah.
next like 65 minutes. I was like, oh, what a wonderful world to jump back into.
Yeah.
I
Also,
yeah.
the using the words on the
Uh-huh.
page,
Oh,
just that
yes.
device that they introduced back in the 60s. I remembered when I was reacquainting myself with the films going, oh, I loved that when I was a kid. So we wanted to put more in there. Sorry, Britt.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that I'm a big Winnie the Pooh fan and always have been. I went to Disneyland in April, and it was
Mm,
my nephew's second time going, but first time he was excited about it. He's 4, and so we all made sure we had Winnie the Pooh matching shirts to
nice.
go, and he was very happy. He didn't want to meet anybody, but he was excited to see Winnie the Pooh from afar, and he went on pool rides, and I feel like that was a big success
Yeah,
because that kid's
that's
scared of
great.
everything.
So Winnie the Pooh was right up your alley then.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
very excited, and I was like, when Ray is finally not scared of watching movies, I can't wait to show this to him because movies are a little too long for him at this
Sure.
point. But he does love a nice short animated series. So we've been really getting into those, which is nice.
Good. And we kept Pooh brief. So
Yes. Oh,
It's a
I
great
watched it
length.
the other day. It's perfect length. It's so cute, and the animation is really just a wonderful throwback to the original.
great.
I really enjoy that one. It was just like a warm hug, right? It's like,
Yeah,
That's
oh, this is just
exactly, yep.
comfort.
good. I'm glad to hear that. That's what we wanted to get across. So
I love that. So my next question is from the Howdy Beans podcast. And we're going a little different direction, but did you understand at the time how iconic Tarzan was going to be,
mm.
like from the story and the music and the visuals, or was it a shock to you and the team how well it was received and how loved it was at the time and still is to this day?
hmm um well, I think I remember, I guess I'll speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure I remember having this conversation with some of my other story teammates at the time on that film. It was really cool that Disney was doing, it was subject matter that was somewhat different from Disney, at least at the time. It wasn't a fairy tale. Um, it it was going to be a story with music, but it was not a musical, and it was based on pulp entertainment, which again was not very typical with Disney, but super cool. We were all like, "Oh, that's so neat!" Doing something that's a little pulpier, a little more, in that genre. So we were all really excited about it, as is always the case. I'm sure you've heard from talking in your many discussions with filmmakers and all that. Somewhere in the middle of a production, you always go, "Oh no, I don't know if this is going to come together." um, and especially with animation that takes so long, sometimes there's moments where you just think, I don't know what we have, and is this going to work ever? Um, and I remember one of the reasons was because this was when the movie, there hadn't been any animation done yet. It was all storyboarding still, and we were developing the story that way. And so Tarzan was one of the most boring characters in the movie. It wasn't until they started getting animation cut in, Glenn Keane and his team animating that character, that we went, oh, because Tarzan's such a visual character. He's
So
really not a
physical.
verbal character. So much of him was about his body language, how he curls his fingers and the brow and the animal behavior, all that stuff. And that's not stuff you can get in a storyboard. You can sort of imply it, but storyboarding is not about nuance and subtlety and complexity and eye darts and all that sort of stuff. That's the animators. That's what they bring to things, and they bring those characters to life in that capacity. Story, you can only do so much. So because he didn't say a lot, and because it was in storyboarding, he just seemed like he was dead weight, and that was a problem. But then we realized, oh, he is a purely animation character. He is all about his
Ugh.
physicality and body language. And then things kind of started taking a turn. And I would say it wasn't a shock that it turned out great, but it was certainly a welcome relief and like, oh yeah, man, it's great. And certainly back then, in this particular case on Tarzan, um, for me, I left the project in '98 and went on to Emperor's New Groove, and so there was still a year left of production until the movie came out in '99. So I knew the movie up to a certain point, and then I left, and so it wasn't until you go to the wrap party and you're like, "Whoa, oh my gosh!" And you see not only how they realized everything in the beautiful production and animation, but like, oh, and they also elevate. You're always elevating the story at every step of the way, even if it's not in a storyboard. So you also, as a story artist, you don't always get to see those things. So it was also nice to kind of, it was a surprise, I guess, not a shock, a happy surprise, not like, I think I knew I don't think we ever doubted it wasn't going to come together, but there's just those moments where things look a
Oh,
little dark. And it was like, oh yeah, it came together. So a welcome surprise.
I do theater, and I can understand that because
Yes.
there's always that moment where I'm like, I don't think this is gonna work. I'm currently doing a production of Anything Goes, but it's set in
Oh,
space,
oh
and
wow.
and it, you know what? Show is great, super talented cast. There absolutely was a moment 2 weeks ago before we opened where everyone was like, "What are we doing?"
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. It's great. It works out. But when you said, there's always that moment, you don't know if it's going to work. I'm like, I think it's a rite of passage for
Yeah.
people who work in the arts, being like, my vision, will it come to fruition? We don't
Yeah.
know.
Even if
But
it's like just doing a drawing, it can
yeah,
be just you, or it can be a group thing, or it can be a film, whatever, just creating anything. Even if it's
yeah,
not entertainment, there's just bringing anything to life that wasn't there before. Um, there's always that moment of, should I be doing this? Is this the right thing?
yes,
Why did I start this? I've forgotten why I even thought this was a good idea. All of that stuff. It's just human
exactly.
nature, I think,
I totally agree. There's that little pocket inside of us all where we're like, okay, are we asking this question because we want it to be better? Or are we asking this question because we're having imposter syndrome and we think I shouldn't even be doing this?
Yeah. Or
There's
you've
those
gotten
moments.
what happens a lot in animation is we iterate so often. We see our movies in storyboard form. We workshop them so often that you also just the ideas get stale because you've seen them so many times.
Yeah.
Jokes aren't funny, things aren't emotional, and you sometimes have to remind yourself it's not that the material is bad, it's just that your eyes have gotten stale.
Used to it. Yeah.
And so you got to bring in some fresh eyes, or you got to do something to kind of remind yourself, no, it's okay. You just can't see the forest for the trees at the moment.
Yeah. Especially when you're living in it for so long, it just inundates you and you think, what can we do next to breathe life into this?
Yeah,
And usually that means go to the next part, like move on
yeah,
and let somebody else come in to revitalize whatever it was in you that really wanted you to take the project.
yeah,
It,
exactly.
it's art's fun.
Hmm.
It really is.
It's also fascinating to hear the idea. Like, I can only picture Tarzan having tons of personality as a character, and so it's
Yeah,
it's really fascinating to like think about just seeing him on a storyboard where you're not getting all of that animated personality, because as solely as a viewer, I can just see the poster of
Yeah.
Tarzan and immediately get the personality of that
yeah,
character that got brought to life so well.
yeah.
Yeah.
But he just became the straight man for so long, and it's like, why are we making this movie then? It's called
Yeah.
Tarzan. But
Let's just make it about Jane. That's
yeah,
fine. Call it Jane.
but it was, it's sometimes the reality that you have to face as a story artist is that you can only do so much in your storyboard. And, but again, that's the whole point of
True.
the process, is that every stage elevates and pluses the project. So you also have to have that as a leader. You have to have that faith also in the process that yes, we got to make sure it works in story, but there's gonna be all these other levels that come in lighting, in design, in layout with the camera, in animation, all that stuff. So
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And can I just say, Emperor's New Groove was always one of my comfort films when I was a kid. I watched that movie so many times, so many times.
It really resonates with a certain generation, right around
yeah,
Brit
Yes,
and myself. Yeah.
I'm
yeah,
36, so yeah, it's my generation for sure. Us millennials, we love it.
we've
Yeah,
had
it
a
still has
few.
legs.
Yeah, I know, and we never would have guessed because it tanked at the time. The studio didn't really get behind it, and we didn't know there would be an internet. We didn't know there would all be all the social media stuff, whatever. So you just think, well, I guess we had fun, but I guess nobody's ever going to remember that thing. And now this year being the 25th anniversary,
Yeah,
um, our little group has done a bunch of podcasts and panels and things, and it's
cool.
like, wow, it's so cool to see that it still survives and has become part of pop culture with memes, and
Mhm.
everyone's reference it's quote, like there's so many quotes that people do all the time from the movie, so it's great to see that.
Oh, well, and that's something that I find so interesting with so much media that people are worried might disappear just with the way that things are online. I think that it's really beautiful to see something that maybe at the time wasn't as successful as people expected it to be, but really does have a life after, which I
Yeah,
think just proves that art should be available to everybody, because
Yeah,
we don't know what people in the future are going to feel about a
yeah,
specific thing. Like Yzma and Krunk are two of my favorite characters
yeah,
ever. So it makes me happy that you're experiencing that now, because I guarantee there was a huge following back then of kids who just could not get enough of that film
uh,
and still can't.
Yeah, it had a major life, I have to imagine, once it hit VHS,
yeah. I
for
Yeah.
think that's
sure.
what it was.
Yeah.
This the home video market really kicked it into gear.
Physical media.
Yep, yep.
All
Physical
right. Well,
media.
now it's
Important.
time to we're gonna let Steve tell a little bit of a story through his. I'm gonna just rip off Letterboxd's 4 favorites, but we're gonna do a little theme around this for you, Steve. Okay.
Love that.
All right. So
Okay,
I'm gonna have you pick 4 films, and we're gonna sort of give you a theme for each of them. So
okay.
the first film I want you to give me is, what is your number one favorite animated film of all time?
Mm. Well, it's of course going to be a Disney movie, not because I think I'm saying they're the best, but just for me personally, that's where I come from. It's changed over the years. I have to say it might be a weird choice, and maybe it's cheating because it's 2 movies in one.
You can cheat.
Yeah.
Okay, but Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
Mm,
I think as time goes on, you talk about movies that are warm blankets and comfort movies. To me, I just love both of those films. I think they're perfect. I think they just feel they have such a classic Disney charm and heart and feel to them, but also some great kind of spooky moments, spooky fun moments, moments of tension, just sort of all around great storytelling. Um, and I just love them, and I just can't get enough of them.
great
So,
pick. I just watched them for the first time within the last month, and I was
oh
like,
yeah,
how did I miss these my whole life?
They're so good.
like those, just even if they were just separate films, they're still 2 of my favorite films, just films in general, films
Mhm.
period ever made. I just think they're pretty perfect.
All right, starting off
Love
on a good
that.
note there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Now let's go. Since you are an animated expert in the field, why don't you give somebody an underrated animated film that you
Mm.
really want to champion?
I think this might not be underrated to other people. People might say I'm crazy to say this is underrated, but I think I'm going to say Kiki's Delivery Service
Oof.
by Miyazaki. Um, I know people love Miyazaki, and I don't think his movies are necessarily underrated, but I personally kind of gravitate to his earlier films. Um, Totoro and Kiki certainly are 2 of my all-time favorites, and I think because of the simplicity and the real kind of human character focused stories, they're just so simple and so human. I love the more recent stuff, but I think some of those might, for me, get a little too surreal and a little too big and kind of heady. They're beautifully done, but I guess I'd like to make sure people don't forget some of those earlier films. See the breadth of his filmmaking, because obviously he's done so many different types of films on different scales, which is great. But don't forget some of those early little simple gems, and I think Kiki for me is my favorite of that era.
I know I had a reaction to that, and I just feel like I should explain. I am a champion for Kiki's Delivery Service. It is one of my favorite movies. I adore that film, and I agree. I do actually think it's very underrated. I think, I love Hell's Moving Castle. I think it's one of the
Hmm.
best animated films I've ever seen. It's in my
Hmm.
top 10 probably. But I do think that people quite often forget about the earlier stuff, and
Yeah,
especially ones that are so slice of life, like Kiki's
yeah,
Delivery Service.
yeah,
And yeah, it's just beautiful. And the moss on that house, I can't get over it.
yeah. It's just lovely that there's still a fantasy element to it, so it can speak to
Yeah,
animation. But at the end of the day, it's just a story about people
yeah,
and
yeah.
dealing with their problems and just living their lives. And that's great. I love that. We need more of that in animation, because everything has to be a high concept or a big thing, which is nothing wrong with that too, but let's not forget the human element to our
Yes.
stories.
I
If
love
you
that.
hadn't already won over Britt, you definitely did say Miyazaki right there. She is
Yay.
the Miyazaki queen. Yeah.
Great.
I
Uh,
am. I'm
Nice.
obsessed.
all right. Well, we're going to stay in the international lane for this one. So why don't you give us an international feature film that you love? Can be any country, but just something you love outside the United States.
Great. I remember a few years ago seeing a movie called Ernest and Celestine,
Hmm.
a French film. a little talking animal film about a bear and oh no, it's been, I believe it or not, I only saw it once, but I loved it so much that I've forgotten some things about it, but I've always remembered it as like it hit me in such a great place when I first saw it, because it's also simple, super charming, just about fun characters interacting, very cartoony. It felt to me like a Disney movie that was not being made by Disney. Um, and I definitely recommend people checking it out. It's a talking animal movie, but um, and it's a hand drawn film, and I believe it is literally was drawn on paper, or like a lot of it was. I don't quote me on that, but they screened it at the studio at Disney at the time, and the filmmaker was there to give a presentation. I'm pretty sure he was showing like his pencil tests of that from that show. So it's really lovely and charming and just wonderful.
That's cool. It's on my watch list. I haven't watched it yet, but it's
Cool.
like now it's going straight to the top.
Well, what's amazing is next year Britt and I are going to be covering the year 2012 and like rewriting history. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
looking at Letterboxd, and it's a 2012 film, so it
Oh,
immediately
was it?
went to
Oh,
it's on my watch list. So Britt
perfect.
and I will cover that for sure and mention you on that episode.
Oh,
Another
great.
animated
wait.
film to talk
Yeah.
about during that episode. I can't wait.
Nice.
All right, now Steve, your final fourth movie we're going to let you round out. This is just going to be your wild card pick. So just a
Okay.
favorite film, animated, live action, whatever. Just throw one of your favorite movies out there.
Okay. This one's maybe not one that a lot of people have heard of. You guys might have, because you do really deep dives into movies. This is a live action movie, and because you said wild card, I just thought, all right, I want to pull one that's sort of obscure, but I just really love. It's a movie called Housekeeping. It's from '87, I believe. Live action movie directed by Bill Forsyth, starring Christine Lottie. And it's about these two adolescent girls in the 50s up in the Pacific Northwest who lose their mother. She commits suicide.
Oh,
And their aunt, Sylvie, played by Christine Lottie, comes to stay with them and take care of them. And she is a very quirky individual. Like she's like a newspaper hoarder, so there's like stacks of newspapers in the house. Like she's just one of those people that's a little off. It sounds like a broad comedy, but it's not. But it's funny. It's definitely more of a drama, but there's a wonderful heart to it. It's also very moody, very kind of gray. It is Pacific Northwest, so it's kind of a cold gray mood piece.
I get
Christine
that. That's
Lottie's
where I'm from.
amazing. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm here right
you
now.
probably really relate to it then.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe not story wise, but location wise. It's a really beautiful film, and again, it runs that gamut of charm and heart and humor, but also some really deep, darker, emotional stuff. It's just a great mood piece. One of my favorite films growing up in the 80s. I just was so taken by that film. So I thought I'll mention that. Maybe it'll be something that people can go check out and discover,
Yes.
and hopefully you'll like it.
I'm excited to watch this film. I've never heard of it, and thank you so much for bringing that, because I'm always looking for something new and exciting and about the Pacific Northwest. So
I didn't think I was going to get two watch list movies from this conversation, and you're clearly like synergetic with the show, because I'm covering 1987 in a couple of months.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm just going to add that one in there too.
Wow.
So perfect. Thank you, Steve.
Wow. Yeah. Good.
Perfect.
I hope you enjoy it, and everybody else out there that checks it out. I hope you enjoy it.
I can't wait. That's awesome. All right, now let's get to Britt's favorite game in the world. We're going to
God.
do a little blind ranking. So
So stressful.
I promise I won't make it too hard on you. So for anyone who's not familiar with blind ranking, I've got 5 animated films in a list here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go one at a time, and I'm going to list that movie. And Steve and Britt are each going to go decide if that movie's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 1 being the best movie, 5 being the least of those, but you have no idea what's coming next. So a little bit of a gamble how high or how low you're going to place a movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we're gonna start out nice and slow. It's right around Christmas time when this episode goes up, so we are going to begin with the classic 1966 version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So, Steve, where do you want to put that at 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
I'm gonna put that at 3, just so that I have somewhere to go.
Okay, smart, safe.
I'm gonna go ahead and put it at 4. I do love it, but I'm curious to see what's coming next.
Okay.
I'm so worried though. It's all gonna be Christmas movies, and I'm gonna be like, I don't know. I don't watch Christmas movies very often.
That will be our only Christmas movie for this conversation here. I was pulling movies off my physical media stack this morning. Next one we're gonna stay in that same general wheelhouse. We're talking Disney. Let's talk about a Disney classic, 1967's The Jungle Book. Okay. Britt, why don't you start us off? Where are you going to put The Jungle Book? You got 1, 2, 3, and 5 available.
I'm going to put it at 3.
3, okay. Steve, you've got 1, 2, and 4, and 5.
I'll put it at 2.
2, okay. I assume you're a Jungle Book fan.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. It's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
It's solid.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. The songs, the animation, it's all there. All right. Third one we're going to go to now. This is, for me, my underrated animated film. Whenever somebody's like, hey, let me check something out that you were raised on. It scared me to death when I was a kid, but it's one of my favorites from the 90s, and that is Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, which I love Fern Gully so much. Okay, so Steve, you have 1, 4, and 5 where you can place Fern Gully. And feel free to share any Fern Gully opinions since people aren't that familiar with it.
I think it's a great movie. I will put it at 4.
Okay.
With all due respect.
I'm gonna put Fern Gully at 5.
Okay.
I really love it. Tim Curry forever.
Yes.
Like, my God, that slime. It scared me, but I also wanted Krista's outfit. So, like, it's like, can I just be her? She's so cute.
All right, so Britt's got 1 and 2 left. Steve's got 1 and 5. So
oh boy,
you're on the knife's edge right now. Okay, our fourth film is one of the legendary, most influential Japanese animated films of all time, and that is Akira, one of Britt's favorites. I know Britt's going to say 1, I'm sure.
I mean, yes, Akira is 1. We know that.
And Steve, you've got 1 and 5 to place Akira.
That's tough.
You're on. It's a dangerous game now.
Yeah. Because if I say 5, then everybody gets mad at me.
No, you're allowed to say 5. It's not for everybody.
The internet's very chill about animation, I'm sure. You know
super chill.
Yeah.
No one has any opinions whatsoever.
Nobody even gives it a second thought. I'll put it at 5 with, again, all due respect.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You can blame me
for everybody. Like, let's be real.
You can blame me if the tables get turned too much on this 5th and final movie. So Steve's got his 1 spot, Britt's got her 2 spot, and we're going to talk about, maybe alongside Toy Story, the most profitable Pixar franchise out there. And the very first one, Lightning McQueen. We're going to Radiator Springs with Cars. So Steve, Cars is going into your number 1 spot, Britt number 2.
Okay.
Darn.
How do you feel about Cars, Steve?
Not so great.
That is a very politically correct answer. I appreciate that.
I would flip Akira with Cars if I could, but I can't.
I was trying to lean you in that direction. We didn't.
I would flip Cars and Fern Gully, to be honest. My nephew loves Cars. Well, did until we went on the Cars ride, and then he got very scared because it wasn't even like the tractor that scared him. It was because the police officer told him to stop doing something, and he doesn't like being told to not do something. So he got upset and was like, I'm done. It was very funny. He's fine. He'll still watch it, but he does talk. He goes, but then whatever the character's name is, he said to stop doing that, and I wasn't doing anything. We're like, it's just a ride, and he's not into it.
Funny. I love that.
All right, so for the internet people out there, if you want to get mad at Steve or Britt,
Right.
send all your hate mail my way because I'm the one that created this horrible game. So
Oh, you
That's a
know they'll
fun
send it.
game. That's a really cool game.
Isn't it
Love
fun?
that.
all right,
Yeah.
It stresses me out.
It's stressful, yes. I'll read back your 5 just so you can remember where you place things. So Steve's got Cars, The Jungle Book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, and at number 5, Akira. Britt has Akira at 1, Cars at 2, Jungle Book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and Fern Gully in 5. Feel free to send all your anger my way. I knew when I put Akira and Cars at 4 and 5, it was going to be a problem.
Rude. That is just rude. You know that, right?
I know. I set you up for it.
But well done from the game creator standpoint.
All right, well let's talk about another little spot that I really want to try to dig into while we've got some time still. So I am so fascinated with what goes into the process of directing an animated feature, because again, on the regular show that I do, it always comes up in conversation. People are never really sure, should we be nominating directors for best director? And some people get very defensive about not wanting that to be the case. And I feel like you're the perfect person to shed some light on giving us a window into like what goes into directing an animated feature that maybe people who are only familiar with live action directing can get some knowledge for. Like, please give me some of that knowledge. Like, what goes into the direction process on an animated feature?
I mean, it's everything that a live action director does. It's shepherding the film or TV episode or whatever it is through every stage of its life, up until the premiere and the release. Now, I will say, just for context, everything is relative to where you're making the movie. Or is it independent? Is it a studio? What's your budget? What's your schedule? What's your leadership like? What is your my experience was directing at Disney Animation, so we have a certain way of making films there that other studios don't do, that independent filmmakers don't get the luxury of having, and they still make great movies. So there isn't really one way of doing it. But I think overall, it's no matter where you are where you enter the project as a director, once you are on the project. So sometimes you are the one that plants that seed at the beginning and you grow the thing all the way through. Sometimes as a director, you're brought on when there already is a script and that has been decided on, and you're brought on to then execute that script. But at whatever point you're brought on, you are the driver of that car, all the way through to the end, the same as a live action director. I think the difference with animation is it is not as, you are obviously not on a set. You are not with actors every day with cameras, that kind of thing. It can feel a little bit more passive because it's, in a weird way, it's like making a movie in an office from 9 to 5 every day, as opposed to build a crew, shoot for 6 months, and then all disband and you edit it and then you release it. It's not as quite on your feet or at least visually, when you look at a director in live action, they look like, wow, they're up on their feet and they're doing stuff, and versus animation where no, they're just sitting in meetings all the time. But it's creatively and intellectually all the same things. It's just done in a different way. And I think the main difference is time, the amount of time it takes to make live action versus animation. In animation, as a director, you have time to iterate, you have time to process, you have time to try things. And then when they don't work, you can pivot and try something else. In live action, you don't really have that time. You might have that time in the script development where you can try a couple different versions and drafts. But once you lock that script, you're shooting that thing and you're on a set and you have to make decisions in the moment right now. Can't necessarily think twice. You have to do it. You do whatever you planned, whatever location you got, you scouted and that you're using. Everything there, you have to just use it right there and act in the moment. Very different from live action. I don't know if that makes any sense. I feel like I started rambling a bit there towards the end.
No, I think that was very clear, actually.
Because an animated
really
feature can take like 3 to 5 years to make.
Yeah.
A live action feature, depending on the scale of it, you can shoot for a few months and have the film released the same year. You can prep something in the beginning of a year and have it out in Christmas.
Well, and something I'm always intrigued by is it feels like a lot of animated features have usually at least two directors on them.
Mhm.
And so, how's the process when you're directing with like Don Hall, for example? Are you two sort of delegating different duties? Are you guys always side by side? Like, how have you found the process of having two directors on a project? How do you work in tandem with someone else?
Yeah, for Don and I, we decided early on that we were not going to split up the duties. We were just going to each go to every meeting together, and we're just going to do it all there. Because it can sometimes, the reason they do two directors often is because animation can get very big and there's armies of
Yeah.
people that you're dealing with, and sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day, so you divide and conquer.
Mhm.
And this director sits in the story room and deals with that, while this director is in animation dailies, and then this one does lighting, and then this one does whatever. But there's always that moment where you have to come back together and have another meeting where you catch each other up. And so Don and I thought, well, let's not waste time doing that. It's also because it was Winnie the Pooh and it's a simpler production. We even crew wise, it was a smaller crew. It was a little easier to manage, so we didn't have too much. It wasn't so overwhelming that we couldn't eat. We couldn't stay together. So we just thought, let's just stay together, make our decisions together, and then we don't have to have that extra meeting at the end of the day where we fill each other in on what we talked about. So
That
that's
makes
kind of
sense.
how we did it.
Yeah.
Except on Meet the Robinsons, you take on the entire brunt of the directorial duty, which I'm sure
Yeah.
was a lot of weight on your shoulders.
No
Yes,
stress at
there
all.
was
Yeah.
for sure. But I think both work. Currently, the project I'm doing, I'm solo directing, and it's fine. It works great.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome. Wow, Andrew, you and I are so in sync. As we said that at the exact same time. I have a question from one of the most wonderful humans in the world, Mike, over at Cinemas. He is a huge fan of Tarzan, and he loves the story structure that was used. And he would like to know what the writing process is like for animated films. And I know we kind of went into that a little bit earlier, but what he said was there are often so many credited writers that I'm genuinely curious how many drafts it goes through and if writers collaborate with each other or if
Mm.
everyone takes a pass at the script on their own.
Well, using Tarzan as an example, just as a case study, that one did have quite a few writers. There was one writer at the beginning. His name was Tab Murphy. He also wrote Hunchback and Atlantis, and maybe a couple others that I'm forgetting. He wrote the first treatment and draft, I believe, then went away. And then throughout the production, there were different solo writers brought on, and then they left. Different writing teams brought on, and then they left. Eventually, the team that stayed on to the end were Bob Zudiker and Noni White. We also had a kind of a punch-up guy named Dave Reynolds, who went on to write Emperor's New Groove. And they kind of brought the movie home. But for whatever reason, on that film, they went through a lot of writers. They brought in a lot of people and tried them, and then maybe they didn't necessarily work, so they tried another group and another group. But in the early days of Tarzan, before they really settled on the writer, we, the story artists, were kind of writing our own material. When we didn't have a writer, they would just give us stuff and say, okay, we're going to play around with this sequence. This is where Tarzan meets Jane, and it needs to start here and end there. Go play. And that's the great thing with animation. Certainly a place like Disney is that you'd have storyboard artists, many of whom can generate material. So you can use them in different ways. You can use them early on in the development where you want to just like in live action, you would hire a couple actors to come in and do an improv or a table read or something like that just to get
Yeah,
something on its feet. You can use storyboard artists to do that, and
that's so
they
cool.
can storyboard stuff that's either written or not written. And then also throughout the process, you can use them as writers. Speaking for how I would like to work, the two films that I worked on, directed there at Disney, and also the one I'm working on right now, I like a very hand-in-hand relationship between director, writers, and storyboard artists. I like it to be very collaborative. Um, the writer is writing their pages, the storyboard artists are writing with images, and we're all coming together and kind of making one thing. That's how we did it on Meet the Robinsons. On Winnie the Pooh, we actually didn't even hire a writer. It was all story artists. All of us,
That's
Don
cool.
and our story team, we all wrote the movie. Which is why on the 2 movies I directed, to the question about why there's always so many credited writers, on both Meet the Robinsons and Winnie the Pooh, I felt it was very important that everyone got credit for the writing. So I credited the writers and the story team on both of those movies. Unfortunately, of course, we got slammed. So on Meet the Robinsons, there was a lot of critic reviews that said, "Oh, the movie sucked, and look how many writers there were on it." And it's like, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
I felt it was very important that they got credit, and I still stand behind doing that.
I
And certainly on Winnie the Pooh, it was very appropriate to credit the entire team, because I can point to stuff the whole movie and go, that story artist wrote that, and that one wrote that, and that one wrote that, and I wrote that. And so I prefer to do that. And the one I'm working on right now is exactly the same way. It's driven a little stronger by the writer, but we also let the story artist come in and take the pages. But if they want to do some tweaks, if they want to trim some lines, if they want to add some stuff, they all have that freedom to do that. So we're making it all together.
I love that collaboration. It's
Yeah.
so I imagine that being in those rooms can be highly stressful at times, but
Mhm.
also so just creatively engaging
Yeah.
and incredible. Like, oh, that's so cool. Thank you
Yeah.
for going into that.
Of course.
I learned something very new there. I didn't know that at all. And I also thank you for crediting everybody, because
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So
Yeah.
many people are usually forgotten about or like left on the wayside. And that shows me how much integrity you have for your team and for the projects you work on. That's very cool.
And that's way of working. Then it's, I often, back to the, what does an animation director do? A lot of times my answer to people is, on a more abstract level, I say my job is to make sure that, my job is to eliminate fear from the room, from the process, so that every room is a safe space. People can say anything. They can have a note about anything. They can raise their hand and go, "I hate that," or "I love that," or "What if we did this?" or "Can we try something else?" And everyone's going to get listened to. We can't include every idea, but everybody's going to get listened to, and those ideas are going to live in the moment, and you never know when those ideas may come back. So my job is to create that safe space for everyone to feel that they can contribute and that they will not be punished for saying anything. And that I think, and this is not to toot my own horn, but I think that's the only way this kind of process works, is when the show leadership can say, and it's our job to make sure that everyone has that safe space to contribute. Because it's one thing to say we want everybody to contribute, it's another thing to then create that space. And I've been on many
Yeah.
films where they say that, "Please, yeah, give us your notes," and then you give them their notes and you see them shut down, and you see them get defensive, and you see them kick you out of the room, like all that stuff. And so they're not backing it up with their actions. So in the abstract sense, me as an animation director, my primary job is to create that safe space for the team, because this process is about sitting in rooms with large numbers of people coming up with ideas, and not on a set necessarily, but in a room. So I have to set that tone. Sorry, that's a ramble.
No,
No, it
you,
wasn't. It
you
was
never know when
pretty-
you never know when an idea is going to spawn the next idea from
Oh
a
yeah.
my gosh.
brainstorm or a conversation like that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
just yesterday at the end of the day, our head of story was like, "Oh, what about this in this sequence?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." You
It's an
have to keep
evolution,
that.
right?
Yeah, you have to keep the space free like that, because you're absolutely right, and you never know when it's going to come. It could come like super late in the game. It could come right at the beginning. You just never know. And if you if people if you close off the space for people, you're not going to get those ideas. And my ideas are finite. I only have so many ideas, and not all of them are good. So if it's just about my ideas, we're screwed. So it's only going to make things better if people have that ability to contribute.
Ugh, I love the amount of collaboration that goes into this. It's
Yeah,
very inspiring, to be honest.
100%, yes.
yeah.
All right, we're going to take you out with one final question, Steve.
Okay.
This comes from Peterson W. Hill, friend of the show. His question is, in live action, the visual language is quite different between TV and film. He's curious as a writer and a director how you approach different visual mediums of TV and film for animation. You've obviously dabbled in both. And what role has streaming played in this, if it has at all?
Mm. Um, well, it goes. Hopefully, this isn't kind of a crass answer, but a lot of it does go back to again budgets and schedules and what the circumstances are that you're making the project. And I think that's also why you see the difference in live action production. Some TV shows have smaller budgets and have to be done quicker and don't have as many resources as other things or as feature films. So there's sometimes compromises that have to be made. Same thing happens with TV animation versus feature animation. Um, a lot of times you don't have as many resources, you don't have as much time, you don't have the big budget. So you have to stage things a little simpler. You have to design your characters a little simpler, your world a little simpler. Um, that's often why TV relies more on dialogue, because it's a little easier to just sort of cut to the chase and have a character say what they want to say, as opposed to in a feature, sometimes you can really design the visuals to say the thing and eliminate the dialogue and get more complex in the storytelling. Sometimes TV is just like, nope, just get to the point. So it really does depend on the circumstances. On Monsters at Work, that was a series that the appetite for that right off the bat was, this needs to be done on a TV schedule, but it needs to have the quality of a feature because it has to live on the shelf next to the first two Pixar Monsters movies. So we did a hybrid version where it was kind of a TV schedule and rhythm, but we iterated on storyboards a lot more, because that's one thing that's great about features is you can iterate more and you have more bites at the apple to hone your story. So whereas in regular TV, you write your episode, you board it, you edit it, and you ship it to the vendor. On Monsters, we wrote it, boarded it, edited it, looked at it, tore it back down and did some revisions, saw it again. Maybe we screened it like 3 or 4 times before we decided, okay, now we're going to go ship it, so we could hone the story a little bit more. We also had, which was a huge thing for Monsters at Work, we had a team here in LA, we call our scouting team, and there were 4 artists that were digital camera folks, and they locked down the camera for every episode, every shot. We did all of the camera mechanics here. We could control that storytelling aspect. So when it was sent to our vendor up in Vancouver, they just used our cameras, and then they started animating and did everything else from there. So the storytelling, we were able to control that here, versus usually you storyboard it and send it to your vendor, and then the vendor does the camera off of your storyboarding, which, not that that's a bad thing, but it's just one less thing you have total control over.
Yeah.
And so since the appetite was so high on Monsters at Work, that was a hugely important step to make sure that the visual language felt like a movie. I think I might have gone off track in that answer. But again, I guess the point being, it depends. And that was the framework for Monsters at Work, TV production, but with a creatively with a feature appetite. So how are you going to do it? And so you figure it out. I don't think really streaming has much effect. That's really more about distribution and where it's going to be shown. But I could be wrong about that. I think it's for me, it's a little too early to tell if that affects that or not.
It doesn't, just from like an outsider's perspective, it doesn't feel like streaming. It feels like in live action, streaming has fundamentally affected the way. It feels like quality's deteriorated because they're putting stuff out a little quicker on streaming. Right. But I have not personally felt like animation has suffered from something going direct to streaming versus. Yeah, Britt might have better knowledge of that.
I actually think there are plenty that have gone straight to streaming that I am a huge fan of. One show, Owl House, that Disney did. Owl House is one of my favorite shows that's come out. I love it. Another one, Arcane, beautiful, and it's straight to streaming. Cyberpunk was super fun, super cool. I mean, there's a lot of very interesting animation that's going straight to streaming, and I like it. I like getting more animation. It makes my life happy. So, and there's beautiful quality in those animated shows. So I'm a fan.
What I'm working on now, I can say because it's been announced, it's a Tiana, Princess and the Frog follow-up. It's a 30-minute special, and it is going to go straight to Disney Plus. But nothing about how we're making it is any different from making a feature. So in this case, at Disney Feature Animation, the fact that it's streaming has the only difference is the release date could bounce all over the place because it's streaming and they're not tied to a theatrical release. Otherwise, we're making it just like we would make a feature, in every way.
Cool.
So, congrats on the next project. That's incredible.
Yeah, we're having so much fun. It's really fun.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, this has been just like a truly illuminating discussion for me.
Me too.
I don't even feel like we've really scratched the surface. Like I feel like we could unpack this conversation for hours and hours and hours.
And I'd be happy to.
But you are welcome back literally anytime your schedule will allow it.
I would love to.
A total treat. If you want to come back after your next project comes out and talk about that a little bit, we would certainly be happy to welcome you back anytime.
This has been a treat.
I would love that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you both. It was so much fun. I appreciate it.